What is going on, guys? I hope you are doing great. And in this video, what we are going to talk about is basically how we can work with static arrays and make sure the camera is okay. Yeah, I think it is. And so we are going to work with static arrays of different structures, and in this case particularly with a point struct. Okay, so what we are going to do, first of all, we know that we can create some standard variable, right? There is no problem. We know how we can write down point p1, and that's how we create a point variable that is called p1. But there may be times, just like we've done it with integers, right? There was int num, but we wanted to create an array of integers or an array of floating point numbers, an array of characters. Similarly, we can do the same pretty much by creating a static array of the user-defined structure that we've created. So in this case, we have created a point structure with two fields, int x and int y. Okay, and the name of the structure, the name if we want to create it, is point. So whenever we will use point, it will specify the type of the integer that we wanted to create. But now we want to see how we can create an array of points. So in this line 37, we create a static array of points with a size of 5. So if we will take a look behind the scenes, how it will look like, it will be something like that. Okay, so let me draw it for you. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's add the fifth one. Okay, so 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. This will be the points array, okay, of size 5. And now what I want you to take a look is that understand that each of these elements is now basically representing a variable of type point. So that means that here will be the x value and here will be the y value. And the same will go for each and any of the elements inside of this array, okay? So each of the elements that can be accessed by using the index, okay, these are the indexes, index, each of these elements is going to have two members, x and y. And why do we have just two members? Because that's the type that we've created. And based on this type, we have only two members. If there were additional types or basically another struct, so the members there were basically referred or related to the structure itself. Okay? So we have an array of points called points array. Its size is 5, and we can access each and any one of its elements. So let's try to basically just access, let me get another color. Let's try to access just this element and to store inside of the field x some value and inside of the field of y another value. So how basically should you do it? You should print some message to the user saying, please enter a first x coordinate. And then what you are going to do is simply to read this information and store it inside some variable, right? So the main step here is to understand the structure of accessing a certain element in the array and then accessing a certain field inside of this certain element. Okay? So first of all, what we will do is we will say that points array is just the name of the array, and it will help us to access different fields inside of it. So points array at index 0, all it does is returning you kind of this block. Okay? And what is the type of this block? Its type is of a point, right? It's a point because this is an array of points, 5 elements of point type. And we know that each element has the following members, int x and int y, since it's a point. So we can use the dot to access the x field. So once we use the dot, what we specify is that we are currently looking at, come on, at this region, at this variable x. Okay, after points array at index 0 gave us all of this, and dot x gives us the specific x right here. And then, of course, because that's the syntax of this kind of function, we use the ampersand to specify store it inside the address of x. And then we put some value here, let's say 3. And then we repeat this process and do pretty much the same by accessing and storing the information inside of the y member at points array at index 0. So we store here 5. Okay, that's it. That's all that we do. X and y, storing it 3 and 5. Okay, so let's basically run this program and make sure that so far it works exactly as we expect. For now, let's simply comment out this block because that's the next part of, whoops, come again, no, that's the next part of our tutorial. And now let's run it and hope for the best. Okay, so there you go. Oh, we don't need the debugger, come on. Let's run it. Let's run it. What's going on? Okay, so enter a first point x coordinate, let's say 3. Let's point also, we'll say that let's use 5. And basically, we cannot see it right now, but basically behind the scenes, all that happened is we simply stored the value we specified in this x and the value we specified in this y. That's it. Okay, so far so good. Awesome. So we can move on to the next part, and this next part is basically referred to understanding that we know how to access a specific element inside of this array. And now what we are going to do is to iterate over all of the point array and reading input into each of them. Okay, and getting, let's say getting input into each of them. So we'll use a simple and standard for loop. We will use for I equals to 0 as long as I is less than 5, I plus plus, meaning 5 iterations. On every iteration, we are going to ask the user, please answer some point. Okay, which point? I'm just using here this sign, and %d will be replaced with the value of I plus 1. And the reason why I'm using here I plus 1 is because I want to ask the user enter point 1, enter point 2, and not to start with enter point 0, because the first element of I is going to be 0 at the first iteration. That's not what I want. I want to make it not by the values of the indexes, but rather by some more standard values from 1 up to 5. And then what we are going to do is to access a specific element inside of this array, which depends on the I index. Okay? And once we access a specific element, we will be able to access a specific member inside of this element. Okay? So we know that points array at index I is of a point type. And we can access, we know that a point type is defined by 2 fields in this example, int x and int y. And we can access each of these fields. And then to use the ampersand to specify that we want to store inside of this address of the specific member. So all of this function is going to do is just to read from the user 5 x values and 5 y values and store them accordingly inside of this points array. Okay? And once we stored all of this information, okay, and by the way, once again, it doesn't have to be just integers. It can be a float, it can be a double, it can be a char. There is nothing about it. I'm just using a simple example to make the whole process of thinking and learning this concept to be as much easier as possible, okay? So if we used here something else, so for example, we used, I don't know, some float. So instead of percentage %d, simply use percentage %f or percentage %lf or percentage %c based on the data type that you are working with. Okay, nothing so difficult. Awesome, so after this point, we have our whole array, this guy right here, filled with values. So we can move on, and we can access and print all of these values, basically one by one, and we can access and print the values of each of the static array of points. And how should we do it? Once again, we need to iterate over all the elements. There are 5 in this example. We need to iterate over all the elements of this array and accessing each of the elements. And inside of each of the elements, we need to access each of the members inside of this element. In this case, the point elements. So point %d, the first point, we will use here I plus 1, just like previously I explained, equals, in here %d will be replaced by points array at index I dot x and by points array at index I dot y. Okay, simply accessing the members of a certain element in this array. And the reason why we do not use ampersand here as opposed to scanf is because we want to print the value of the variable itself, right? We don't want to print basically the address. We are not interested at this point, at least. Okay, so let's simply comment this part out and let's run and hope for the best. Let's see what happens. So enter point 1 x coordinate. Let's use 1. What happened? I pressed something wrong. Okay, so let's run it once again. So 1, and let's use enter point 1. Okay, x and y inside of the first point are going to be 1 and 1. In the second point, they are going to be 2 and 3. In the third point, they are going to be 1 and 5. In the fourth, let's say 5 and 5, and 9 and 9. And finally, we can see that point number 1 equals to 1, 1, 1, 1. Point 2 to 2, 3, point 3 to 1, 5, point 4 to 5, 5, and point 5 to 9, 9. So what it means is basically this whole array is stored as probably a sequence of bytes in memory, okay, a sequence of bytes, and each element is also kind of a sequence because it's by itself, it's a struct. So there are going to be, like in this example, let's say integer is 4 bytes, so there are going to be 4 bytes for x, 4 bytes for y, and that's basically the first element. And then there are going to be 4 bytes for x, 4 bytes for y, and so on for the second element, and so on and so forth. You move on with the array itself. Okay? Whew! So, I hope this is clear so far, and that everything that I explained to you is getting more and more clearer. Let's uncomment everything. That's basically the program that we've created now. We have created a structure point. We created a static array of points. It's very similar to how we created an array of integers and an array of floats. We also created, we've seen how we can access a specific member in a specific element in the array, how we can scanf and write the information into it. Let's use, instead of reading, let's use writing. And then we've seen how we can iterate over all the elements, read inputs, write inputs into each of them, and then to access and print all the values inside of these elements. So yeah, this is it. Thank you guys for watching. Keep on practicing, keep on moving forward, and you are bound to succeed. Let me know if you liked this video and the material so far. Please also feel free to leave some reviews, some feedback, some star rating. It helps me a lot in improving the course material, that it will be more optimized for you. Thank you, and until the next video, I'll see you then. Bye.